A significant policy shift, but the Department of Basic Education has announced that teaching graduates who received the Funza Lushaka bursaries and those who were self-funded will now compete equally for teaching posts. Previously, recipients of Funza Lushaka bursaries aimed at Bachelor of Education and postgraduate certificates in education students were given priority for vacant teaching positions. For more on this decision endorsed by the Council of Education Ministers, I'm now joined by the Dean for Education Faculty at the University of Pretoria, Professor Chika Sehoole, as well as Riaan van der Bergh, who is a Deputy CEO from the Federation of Governing Bodies of South African Schools. Good morning to both of you. Thank you so much for making time for us. Prof, let's start off with you. How was the system before? How was the policy implemented around the Funza Lushaka bursary scheme recipients, and when it comes to how far they stand in the queue for a vacant position?
Good morning, Andrian, and to your viewers. The practice and the policy so far has been that the Funza Lushaka bursary holders used to be given preference in the appointment in schools, but it needs to be understood in the context of the kind of policy which government had and is still having at the moment. Funza Lushaka bursary holders were students who were recruited by the Department of Basic Education and the districts in order to fill the vacant, anticipated vacant posts in particular subject areas in particular districts. So because they were recruited by government in order to respond to the need for teacher supply in the districts, they were given preference in terms of the appointment, once they completed their studies. So it was not just the way that they were favored, but it was part of a long-term policy of government to respond to teacher supply need in the system of education.
So, Riaan, how should we then understand this particular policy intervention? Because what, from the explanation now from the Prof, what you get is that it was targeted. So, meaning that the Department of Basic Education will forecast and say that these are perhaps the number of teachers that we would need in the current academic year, or perhaps a future academic year. Therefore, having to plan for that, meaning that we need to have enough teachers. So it was clearly a targeted approach.
Yes.
Okay. Riaan, you can go ahead.
Yeah, it was definitely a plan, and I don't think the plan necessarily worked out the way it was intended. And I think that's where the policy shift comes from now, where the playing field is being equalized for people that self-funded or had bursaries elsewhere can also apply and compete for those jobs that are also part of that targeted need. So yeah, we welcome the move. It is a policy shift. It's endorsed by the Council of Education Ministers. And yes, it gives the people that did not qualify for those bursaries also an opportunity to find employment, whether it be in those subjects that were the targeted need. It's not just the Funza Lushaka candidates that studied in those fields. Two big things that we believe is, number one, the best candidate for the job must be in front of our learners to teach them well. So an SGB school must appoint, in partnership with the department, the best teacher for that school. And the second thing is that I think is critical is that all post-level 1, the junior teacher positions, must be advertised and not just ring-fenced for the bursary holders, so that we can have an equal playing field and more people apply and more candidates can be screened. So I think the critical thing now is for the department to put focus on the advertisement in 8 of the 9 provinces where post-level 1 positions are not being advertised.
Yeah. So what went wrong with this policy, Riaan, before I go to you, Prof?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily that it went wrong. It just didn't play out the way it was supposed to. There's a few hurdles that needed to be overcome. Number one, the advertising of the posts, the availability of candidates. Number two, the market forces, the candidates who were not in the areas where the need was. So yeah, a few things went wrong, call it just organically in the process. and then the availability of posts. There was, in some cases, more applicants than the position, and some of the bursary holders, the self-funded as well as the Funza Lushaka bursary holders, did not get positions.
Yeah. Prof, with the change now in policy approach, what does this then mean for what the government had planned in terms of a targeted approach? And I also wonder whether this could have had any impact at all around the benchmark salary for a particular subject teacher.
Well, the change in the policy actually is leveling the playing field. And as it was mentioned earlier on, there was preference that was given to bursary holders and all other learners, all other students who were self-funded, who received the same quality of education in universities, are now able to compete for the same positions that are vacant. So I think I also, welcome the policy shift. And by the way, we also need to remember that it is not only, students of or learners or children of parents who can afford. Some of the students had to take loans in order for them to fund their studies. So with this leveling of the playing field, I think it is just, the right thing to do. But in terms of the salary question which you raised, I think I don't see any kind of shift or implications for this policy in terms of the salaries that will be paid. I think government has got its own policies in terms of post-level 1 teachers, and I do not see any possible shift in terms of the practice or in terms of the remuneration of these teachers.
Yeah, and the reason that I asked that, Prof, is because you'll have a certain pool of teachers that are available. And if government says that our policy approach is to mainly target children who came out of Funza Lushaka bursary scheme, that must have an impact on the market forces in determining salaries.
Well, I am not aware of that because the government, as I'm saying, there is a policy that determines what learners, what newly appointed teachers are paid, unless it is in the private sector where students who are coming with subjects that are scarce skill might be given a preference or might be paid more, but I'm not aware of that policy.
Okay, Riaan, I'd love to have your take on that as well, but also on top of that, does this policy shift really address the question around teacher shortages? Because Funza Lushaka was very targeted, but does it deal with the question of teacher shortages that South Africa faces? Yes, you have teachers, but not teachers for specific subjects that are quite rare.
Yeah, we've got to remember that the Funza Lushaka program was not the only gateway to teaching and to finding teachers and to supplying teachers. So it was one of the avenues for candidates to get bursaries. Those bursaries have been cut in the new policy, but there are several other options for candidates to study and fund themselves or get a loan or get other bursaries. So I think the teacher shortage is not the question. We have a teacher shortage. We need good teachers, not just many teachers. And hence the question about the salaries, I think, is very interesting and critical. But yes, the PAM, the Personnel Administration Measures document, has a guideline for the starting salaries. It gets adjusted every year, but starting salaries for teachers. And school governing bodies have some leeway in looking at allowances for scarce skills and additional work from teachers. But at this point in time, it's fairly level playing field. So the supply and demand is not being met with the salaries at entry level of teachers, which is possibly problematic and could possibly be looked at. But at this point in time, starting salary for teachers are not way below the average of starting salaries in other industries. So it's still a good career to follow. And we're hoping that the people that are called for this job, it's not just a job, it's a calling to raise the learners of our country, that they find more than just the salary in it, but that they find the job satisfaction, the contribution that they make in this country also attractive to pursue this career.
Thank you so much for your time. Riaan van der Bergh there, as well as Professor Chika Sehoole from the University of Pretoria. Really appreciate your time.